right off of a college campus. So most of the community that I deal with are young university students. In fact, when I was thinking about this topic, I had that demographic in mind. So I apologize if you're not young, but I'm looking at the crowd. Mashallah, everyone here looks young at heart. So and this is my last session for this conference. So I wanted it to be more of a casual, discussion kind of thing. The topic before us is how to develop a relationship with the Quran. So let me start with this. There are a number of nations who were given prophets and messengers who are talked about in the Quran in quite a bit of detail. And almost invariably, when they don't pass the test Allah gives them, one of the sort of divine ways in which Allah deals with people is that when He shows you a miracle, then a miracle in Arabic is called a mu'jiza. That is a term for miracle in Arabic, mu'jiza. And the word mu'jiza comes from the Arabic root ayn, jeen, and za. Ajaza, ya'jizu, means to compel somebody. So for example, like an old woman in Arabic is called ajuza, right? Ajuza. So when Ibrahim a.s. was given the glad tidings of a boy, a son, his wife said, "How can we have a son? I am an ajuza. I'm an old woman." Because elderly people have difficulty getting around. They need help with tasks. So a miracle is called a mu'jiza because it makes you totally dependent on Allah. Once you see it, you're compelled to believe. But what happens when you don't believe in the miracle? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hey there, buddy. No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm trying to get my son into Spider-Man. So could you mentor my son? I think we gotta figure it out. MashaAllah. No, literally, this morning, he woke up. He has this weird habit of thinking that 4 o'clock in the morning is wake up time, and also 7 o'clock is wake up time, 8 o'clock is wake up time. So he woke up at 8 o'clock. I was trying to get ready to come here, and we have this huge Spider-Man stuffed toy that I thought would distract him. He took it and threw it across the room. And so please teach him the ways of Peter Parker. And I'm trying to get him into Spider-Man a lot. He hates it. But anyway, by the way, my son just turned 1 last month, and he started walking yesterday. I missed it because I was here. So, you're welcome, guys. This is why I love you guys so much. I missed such a great, momentous occasion with my son. Alhamdulillah. But I was happy to be here with the students and the young people, and with you guys too. So, what were we talking about? Islam, right? Yeah, okay. So, mu'jiza, yeah. So when a mu'jiza comes and you don't believe in it, that's when the punishment of Allah comes. So there are a number of punishments that are mentioned in the Quran, from earthquakes to floods to an angel taking a whole city on the tip of his wing and raising it up and then crashing it down, right? So what's interesting is when I was little, about his age, my mother used to tell me stories of the prophets as bedtime stories. And of course I was too young to remember this, but she says that every night when she would present a story of one of the prophets and messengers, I would have tears running down my cheeks because of how powerful the stories were. This is not a weird example of how pious I was when I was a kid. I wasn't. I didn't understand the stories, but the stories were so powerful. And because I fundamentally believe that the stories of the Quran are universal lessons for everybody. How many times have you heard someone reading a translation of the Quran and becoming Muslim? They're not even reading it in the original Arabic language, but the stories are so compelling that they're moved by it. They're moved by it, right? So when I used to think about the previous prophets and messengers and the sort of punishments that Allah gave those nations, I would do this weird game where I would be like, which punishment would I hate the most? Right? And of course we know that Allah will never punish our ummah the way that He punished the ummahs of the past. But think about it. If you don't know how to swim, maybe the flood would be the worst punishment for you. If you're scared of heights, like I am, maybe the punishment of like the angel taking the city all the way up in the sky and crashing it, maybe that's the most scary for you. If you're super wobbly, like my son is, because he can barely walk, maybe the earthquake is the scariest for you, because every day is an earthquake for my son, right? So what about you guys? What punishment would be like the scariest to go through? What do you think?
Fire.
Oh, fire, that's scary. What do you think, Hassan?
I don't know. You put me on the spot here. Let me think here. I'm not sure. Like I'm thinking of like Bilal, like when he was.
Like actually being tortured and things,
yeah,
physically.
I would say that.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that's hard. So what's fascinating is the Quran talks about like half a dozen different types of like punishments that Allah gave to nations who didn't believe. But surprisingly, the nation that had the longest laundry list of crimes had the worst punishment. And that was the nation of Banu Israel, the descendants of Israel alayhi salam. So we know Ibrahim alayhi salam had two sons, Ismail and Ishaq. And Ishaq had a son named Yaqub, or Jacob in English, right? And Jacob's nickname was Israel. So all of his descendants are called the descendants or the sons of Israel, Banu Israel. So they had the most prophets and messengers come to them. And interestingly enough, they treated prophets and messengers the worst of any nation. So much so that they murdered a number of them. So the Quran talks about all of their crimes, from violating the Sabbath to questioning Allah and making fun of the commandment when He told them to slaughter a cow, making fun of Musa alayhi salam, constructing a calf and worshipping it when Musa left to get the Torah, and a number of things. I mean, their crimes go on and on and on. So when you think about how Allah, would decide to punish them, what comes to mind? It should be the most severe punishment. Like the brother said, it could have been torture, it could have been fire, it could have been a flood, but actually it was none of those things. It was something that at face value seems really subtle and really just non-consequential. But after mentioning all of their crimes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the punishment He gave them. And He says in the Quran, ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, that Allah made their hearts hard. Now you're thinking like, what in the world? Like they deserve the biggest punishment. That's what Allah did to them? A hard heart? Like I'm 60 years old. I've got like 2 bypasses, 2 heart attacks. I have a hard heart. It's not that hard to live with a hard heart. Like that seems like a lame punishment, if I'm being honest. I know this sounds blasphemous, coming from an imam, but when I first looked at this in the Quran, I was like, really? That's it? They killed prophets. They made fun of prophets. Musa alayhi salam literally is quoted in the Quran as saying, "Lima tu'dhunani?" Why do you guys torture me like this? Leave me alone. Like, can you please have a nice, calm day where you don't violate every commandment of God? Like literally, Allah blessed them out of nowhere with food, and they're like, we don't like it. The Bani Israel were like spoiled Americans. But like the buffet doesn't have that many choices. It's like, really? It's like, I just started taking like groups to Hajj and Umrah. And subhanAllah, the toughest part of taking groups from America to Mecca and Medina is not the travel. It's not like getting sick. It's none of those things. It's the entitlement. It's honestly, if a bus is 5 minutes late, Americans will throw a fit. Where's the bus? How come we didn't start on time? How come it took long in the airport? How come this? How come that? Right? And so, Allah gave them free food in the middle of the desert where nothing grows and nothing's available to eat. And they're like, nah, we want something else. By the way, Allah gave them like birds, basically meat to eat. And what do they ask in return? we want like cabbage, we want onions.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it's like, really, guys? Like, I'm sorry, I'm from Texas. Like, we're big into barbecue and stuff. Why would you replace meat with salad? Salad is the food that my food eats. You know what I mean? Right? So, salad is the thing that I kind of push off my plate. I'm just kidding. Don't do that, kids. Eat your vegetables.
You almost said it.
Yeah. But so they wanted that in return, which is like the height of ingratitude. Right? So after all of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. He hardened their hearts. And then he dedicated the rest of the verse to talking about how hard those hearts became. And the Arabic language already is very vivid and very depictive. However, he goes much more deeper. He says that we hardened their hearts مِنْ ذَلِكَ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ, after their crimes. فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ. Their hearts became like rocks. And rocks are very hard, as you obviously know. أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً. But he said their hearts became even harder than rocks. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. He said there's some rocks that are so hard, but after a long period of time, water can even carve out rocks. You know, like major rivers in America, the Colorado River, Mississippi River, they were carved out over a long course of time because water eroded like the rocks and carved out a stream. So he said that these rocks are being carved with water, but they're still so hard. And he says, وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. And despite their hardness, water is gushing through them, but nothing is penetrating. And he says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah is not unaware of the crimes that they committed. In another place in the Quran, Allah turns the divine attention to the rest of us. Because as the famous companion Muawiyah radiallahu anhu said, whenever they recited Quran, they came upon an ayah like this. And some other companion who was there said, نَزَلَتْ فِي بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. These ayat were revealed about those people. And Muawiyah got very upset. He said, نَزَلَتْ فِيهِمْ. It was revealed about them. وَعِبْرَةً لَنَا. But the lesson is for us. The lesson is for us. So another very famous ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He asked the question, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Isn't it not yet time for the people who believe, for their hearts to be affected when the mention of Allah is done around them? وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. And when the Quran is recited. And when the Quran is recited. Or is it the case that a long time has passed over them, فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, and their hearts became hard? Now the reason why I wanted to start off with this particular introduction is this session is entitled Your Relationship with the Quran. And our relationship with the Quran is multifaceted. So there's a type of relationship that we have with the Quran when we're reciting it. The locus of that action is the tongue. We recite the Quran with the tongue. So we have an entire science called tajweed, qira'at, how to properly recite the Quran. Using your tongue, using your teeth, using your lips, right? So which letters come from the throat, which come from the chest, which come from the lips, right? Interestingly enough, I hate to digress, but there's some letters that are called huruf al-shafatayn, letters of the lips, right? So like ba. Try saying ba without putting your lips together. Is it possible? Can you do it? Yeah, ba. You have to put your lips together, right? So anyone know what the Arabic word is for love?
Hub.
Yeah, hub. Hub has two letters, ha and ba. So true love is between two people. That's when the girls say, ah, right?
No girls here.
Yeah, there's less girls here, that's why. Right? So, hub is two letters, ha and ba. And ha comes deep from the throat. So love starts as something very deep. But ultimately love is expressed by an outward action. So the letter ba is how you end the word. And ba is the most outward of all the letters. Ab, ba, ba. So it's on your lips. So true love is saying I love you with your lips to someone and showing it in your actions. And by the way, how do you kiss your beloved? You put your lips together. The same thing that you do when you say the word hope. Love. Anyway, what were we talking about? Yeah. So anyway, I don't remember either. So the hearts were hardened, right?
No, it's the other verse. You were talking about the other verse.
Yeah.
With the movement.
Yeah, so anyway, so there's different relationships that we have with the Quran. So one is with recitation,
Yes.
how to properly recite the Quran. Number two is actually understanding the words, and that's done in the mind, in one's brain. And finally, we have the application of the Quran, which is done with your limbs. It's done with your limbs. And the main message that I want to kind of convey in this brief session is that you cannot do any of those things without reflecting and contemplating on the verses. So true recitation is reflecting upon what you recite. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, for example, would say we would memorize like 5 ayat, then we would properly understand them, we would reflect on them, we would apply them, and then we would move on to the next set of ayat. Right? And then reflection and contemplation is an act of worship that we often don't do. And unlike the other relationships we have with the Quran, unlike recitation, which is done with your lips and your tongue and your mouth, unlike understanding, which is done in your mind, and unlike application, which is done with your limbs, reflection and contemplation is actually done with your heart. It's actually done with your heart. And that might sound kind of weird and counterintuitive, because don't you reflect and contemplate with your mind? Actually, the Quran has a totally different perspective on this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the question, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ? Do they not reflect on the Quran? And when he asks this question, he offers a reason why people don't reflect on the Quran. They don't contemplate over it. He says, عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do their hearts have locks on them? Now before hearing the last part of the ayah, if I just told you the beginning, that don't people reflect on the Quran, you'd expect Allah to say something like, oh, something's wrong with their mind. They're not thinking hard enough. They're not reflecting hard enough. Their brain has a problem. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after complaining that people don't reflect on the Quran, He immediately then talks about the heart. Their hearts have locks on them. So most of my session this morning, in the time that we have remaining, is going to be centered around how do we prevent our hearts from getting hard. Because if we can get ourselves to do that, then we can begin the process of properly reflecting on the Quran and contemplating over the Quran. Because that is the ultimate relationship that we have with the Book of Allah. If we can't get ourselves to contemplate over the verses and think about the verses and really use our hearts to reflect on them, then the biggest punishment Allah gave to any people is that He made their hearts hard. Right? So He didn't physically punish them. But He made it so that they were exposed to revelation. They were exposed to revelation. They were exposed to the word of Allah. They were exposed to good things. But nothing penetrated the heart. And subhanAllah, there's a reason why out of all of the prophets and messengers, the one who's mentioned the most is the Prophet Moses, Musa alayhi salam. Because his people and our ummah share a lot in common. We share a lot in common. How many of us have been attending khutbahs and lectures and seminars and conferences for years? For years. And especially when I talk to young people, like on campus, the biggest complaint they have is, I've been reading the Quran for a long time, but it just doesn't really hit the way that it should. It's a very common question. Right before Ramadan, we do like a Ramadan intensive to prepare for the month. I'm sure many other communities do the same thing. The most common question we get is every year, in Tarawih, there's a sister next to me, or a brother next to me. Of course, sisters next to sisters, brothers next to brothers, otherwise that would be kind of complicated. But anyway, the person praying next to me is like crying their eyes out. And I'm praying right next to them, but I don't feel anything. Right? What's happening? Why can't I reflect on the Quran the way that they're doing it? So the first thing that I want to say is true reflection is not emotion. Emotion is something that Allah blesses some people with, and others may not have it. And the Prophet alluded to this by praising the people of Yemen. He said, I love the people of Yemen because their hearts are soft and they cry when they hear the ayat of Allah. What is he also saying in between the lines? There are other Sahaba who don't do that. And sometimes, like, reflection will lead you to emotion, to tears, but that is not the, like, actual standard. Like, just because someone's crying and the Quran is being recited doesn't mean that they have a deeper connection to the Quran than the person next to them. So what is true reflection and how can we achieve it? So again, I assumed like 99% of my sessions, they were going to be with college-aged students. I've only done like 1 or 2 sessions the entire conference with like not older people, I'm sorry. Not university students. I'll say it nicely, right? So some of my like advices that I prepared had them in mind, but I think they're universal enough for everyone to kind of take benefit from them. So 3 things, and again, I want to make it as practical as possible. 3 practical things we can do in our life to make sure that our hearts don't become hard. Number 1 is regularly visiting the graveyards. Regularly attending janazah prayers and following the janazah to the burial. The Prophet ﷺ said that I used to prevent my community from attending the graves, but now I will encourage you to do it. Because attending graves at the time of the Prophet had a lot of like superstitious practices, a lot of like mushrik, like shirky things. So he prevented them from coming. But then once the Muslims were well grounded in their faith, he then said, visiting graves is one of the most powerful ways to remind yourself of the hereafter and to soften your heart. Because think about it. No matter how bad an argument was with a loved one of yours, no matter how deep a grudge is, what ends up happening when there's a tragedy in the family? A father dies, a mother dies, an older brother dies. What happens to the family? Inevitably, everyone comes together. And they're like, you know what? Like, let's just bury the hatchet. Let's move on. Let's forgive. So death has a powerful way of reminding us how short life is. And it's not worth it. Right? So one of the most powerful ways of softening one's heart is visiting the grave. Is visiting the graveyard. Number 2 is increasing in one's dhikr. Dhikr is remembrance of Allah. Our own teachers and mentors when we graduated, they made us like literally promise that after you're done, from here on out, if you're not already doing it, but after every salah, not only you should already be doing like the normal dhikrs that we do after salah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, all these sort of things, but they taught us to do salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at least 10 times and do istighfar 10 times. And I can tell you, even though it's anecdotal, it's personal, like evidence, but my entire relationship with Allah changed when I started doing that. Because when you take a moment after the salah to keep talking to God, it changes your relationship with Allah. It really does. And by the way, speaking of Bani Israel, we talked about them earlier, and Musa alayhi salam, one of the most fascinating like stories of Musa alayhi salam is when he talks to Allah directly. Right? So when he goes to the cave and he sees a fire in the distance, and he goes, Allah orders him to take his shoes off, and he talks to him, right? Now, think about what a powerful moment that was. And also think about what he's already been through thus far. If you think about the story of Musa, alayhi salam, he has a number of unforgettable moments in life. Can you think about how unforgettable it must have been to grow up in the household of the Pharaoh? The most infamous, notorious individual in human history. And he had a front row seat to his life. Not only this, but he tried to break up a fight between two people and accidentally kill somebody. Right? And someone came, and unbeknownst to Musa, he tried to give him sincere advice. He told him to leave, and he does. How many of us have been a fugitive from the law? Right? He goes and helps these two girls out who are struggling with their animals. Unbeknownst to him, these are daughters of a prophet. He marries one of them and serves another prophet for 10 years. So up until this point, you could write a book about Musa alayhi salam, and it would be a bestseller. You could produce a movie about his life, it would be a hit. So you think about his life, he had a lot of memorable moments. But you take all of those moments, and you put them to one side. And you compare that to how it felt when he talked to Allah directly. And there was no comparison. And this is not me saying it. When Allah asked him the question, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa? What's in your hand, Musa? He used to carry the staff with him. And so he asked him, what's in your hand? Allah asked him a very simple question. What are you holding? What is the answer? He could have just said, it's my staff. But he didn't. He loved talking to Allah so much that he said, this is my staff, and then he kept going. He then started explaining to Allah what he uses his staff for. He said, أَتَوَكَّأُ عَلَيْهَا. Sometimes I lean on it. Sometimes I use it to beat the bushes and fruit drops down and my animals eat the fruit. Right? Now at the end of the day, it's just a stick. Right? It's not something divine from heaven. We can call it a staff or whatever, but it's just a stick, guys. Right? So how many more things could he do with it? He leans on it, he beats bushes with it, so food drops. But that's pretty much it. Right? What else can he do?
Doesn't he throw it down and turn it into a snake?
Yeah, he does. But not yet. He hasn't done that yet. Very, very good. So Allah will show him later what other things he can do with it. But at that point in his life, he only does two things. He has no idea that Allah will give him the ability to throw it down, Allah will turn it into a snake. That all comes afterwards. Right? So at that point, Allah asks him, well, what is in your hand? He goes, it's my staff, and I do this, and I do this. And, oh wait, I don't do anything else. But when he runs out of stuff to say, what does he say? He says, Ya Allah, وَلِيَ فِيهَا مَآرِبُ أُخْرَى. I have other uses for it as well. I just can't think of them right now. I'm drawing a blank. But don't stop talking to me, because I might remember them. He loves talking to Allah so much that Allah asked him a simple question, and Musa alayhi salam in response went on and on and on. Right? And so this is the power of talking to Allah. That's what dhikr is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, udhkur Allah dhikran kathira. Remember Allah with much remembrance. And finally, the third advice I had, and I apologize, I had a very different crowd in mind when I thought of this. But it is important. The third piece of advice that I wanted to give that helps in softening one's heart. I'll mention it quickly now, and I'll explain it more in detail in a couple of seconds. The basic advice is don't look. Don't look. And I'll explain what this means in just a couple of seconds. The entire Quran is full of ayat telling us to look at the world. Isn't that the case? Doesn't Allah tell us, look at the mountains, look at the trees, look at the sky, look at the earth? Who created all of this? Allah. So looking at nature and reflecting on nature, contemplating over nature, is a powerful mechanism to remind yourself of Allah. So there's nothing Allah tells us to not look at. Look at everything around you and appreciate Allah. But there are two places in the Quran where Allah says it's better for your heart to not look at it. Because the more you look at it, it will poison your heart. The more you look at these things, it will damage your heart. And ultimately, it will harden your heart. There are two places where Allah said, don't look at these things. The first place is do not unnecessarily stare with lust at the opposite gender. At the opposite gender. This will lead you to objectifying Allah's creation and treating the opposite gender like a piece of flesh and not like a human being. And it will harden your heart towards fellow human beings, and ultimately will harden your heart towards Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to lower their gaze. وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. And to protect their private parts. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. That is more pure for them. And in the very next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns His attention towards the woman of the ummah, and He says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing women to lower their gaze as well. So, objectifying the opposite gender will lead to hardening of the hearts. And again, this is more of a problem for younger people than older ones. But nonetheless, the basic lesson still stands that there are two places in the Quran where Allah says, don't look unnecessarily because it will affect the state of your heart. So the first one is looking at the opposite gender. Don't objectify someone of the opposite gender, right? And especially for younger people who are in college, this is especially challenging. Because for the first time in your life, you're no longer living at home. Your parents aren't micromanaging every single aspect of your life. So you have to make the decision to spend your time the way you see fit. To make your schedule the way that you want. To make your choices. To make your decisions. So while your parents and your elders are not with you on campus, know that Allah is always watching. Allah is always watching. Right? So number one, don't extend your gaze unnecessarily to the opposite gender. And number two, something more relevant to some of the older folks, there's another ayah of the Quran where Allah tells us, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجٍ مِّنْهُمْ زَهْرَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. That do not extend your gaze towards what other people have. Do not extend your gaze towards what other people have. Because it will make you ungrateful for what Allah has given you. If you constantly fixate on so-and-so has this, so-and-so has that, so-and-so lives in that house, so-and-so has that degree, so-and-so has this job, you will never be grateful for what you have. For what you have. And the Prophet ﷺ told us over 1,000 years ago that do not look at those who are above you. Rather look at those who are below you. انظر إلى من أسفل منكم. Look at those who are below you, because it will make you more grateful for the blessings Allah has given you. And subhanAllah, one of the biggest ways to go down a path of ingratitude and ungratefulness and hardening of the heart is to fixate on other people. On other people. Now I'll tell you, I don't want to expose my own kind of sins, but every single time my wife and I reflect on, alhamdulillah, last month we celebrated our like 8-year anniversary. So I'm sure some of you have been married for much longer, and that's not much, but it's significant for us. And every single time we reflect on just the journey our life has taken, and the ups and downs, different places we've lived, and the challenges that we've had. At the end of that conversation, we always end up becoming more grateful. But then every single time we talk about topics like our neighbors or other friends who have better jobs than us, who are making more money than us, who have better houses than us, who have more children than us, every single time, no matter what, it always ends with us being in a very spiritually damaging place. Always. Always. We have never compared our life to someone else, except that we regretted it later. Afterwards, we talked and we're like, man, that wasn't good, what we did. It wasn't good. It wasn't healthy. Right? And so these are 3 kind of basic things that lead to softening of the heart. And once again, the reason why that's important is because our most powerful aspect of our relationship with the Quran is our ability to reflect on it, our ability to contemplate over it, our ability to reflect on the Quran. And reflection in Arabic is called tadabbur, and reflect. And every single time Allah talks about tadabbur in the Quran, He connects it to one's heart. To one's heart. He said, that's all good. Showing us how Spider-Man he is. MashaAllah. Did you all hear that famous Kevin Hart joke where his son pretends to be Spider-Man? He starts like webbing everyone, and like as a parent, you have to like pretend and play along, like, oh, you caught me in the web. But then eventually, his son got older and he went to school, and then all of his like classmates started being mean to him. They started like beating him up and stuff. And in response, what did he do? He started webbing them. And the kids were like, what? What's happening? And he's still getting beat up. And like his dad used to come, like, dude, you can't web other people. You're not Spider-Man. And then what did he do? He webbed him in that moment. He's like, oh, I webbed your mouth. You can't talk. He's like, oh man, okay. Whatever. So, inshallah, he has a lifetime of webbing, people. But so anyway, contemplating on the Quran is an action, actually not of the mind and of the brain. It's an action of the heart. It's an action of the heart. And these 3 practical things that we all can do lead to a softened heart. Number 1, not comparing yourself to others, lowering your gaze. Number 2, increasing in with dhikr. And number 3, frequenting the graves and remembering death softens one's hearts and makes one more receptive to the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us of those people who are truly affected by the message of the Quran, that we are people who reflect on its verses, who apply those verses in our life, and our relationship with the Quran is transformed and bettered because we work on our heart constantly, and we make it an active process to cleanse our heart of ill will towards Allah's creation, and we work on cleansing our heart towards connecting it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's once again a pleasure and a blessing to be with you guys. Jazakumullahu khairan. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, any questions? The remaining time is only for questions from the audience.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, you
I don't have to.
You don't have to.
I want to know for people like us that it's not that Arabic is not the first language. What can we make a deeper connection? Of course, I mean people will say learn Arabic. That's also what I'm doing, but it's not like it is a process. Right?
Yeah, what's really interesting is there are like several layers of connection with the Quran. Like we mentioned, I mean, people read translations of the Quran and become so moved that they change their religion because of it. So there is an aspect of the Quran that everyone can plug into, regardless of the language. And when you think about it, like even the worst of creation, like the likes of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, no matter how much Arabic you learn, your Arabic will not be better than theirs. Because they lived in the time of revelation, where Arabic was at its peak. And simply knowing the language, did that help them at all? It didn't. So I do think that while learning the language is a powerful, undeniable mechanism to connect with the Quran, but if that is your only barrier to it, and that's the only thing preventing you from connecting with the Quran, you're losing out on a lot of different other ways of connecting with it. So, and really, this became abundantly clear to me a few months ago. I took a group of converts to Umrah, to Mecca and Medina. These are people who are newly converted to Islam. And they already feel not that much plugged into the community because not everyone shares their experiences. Plus, traveling halfway across the world to a Muslim majority country for someone like that may be a bit challenging and difficult. So the whole point of the group was, let's bring a bunch of converts together and sort of facilitate this journey for them, make it easy for them. So one thing we did, after every salah, we regrouped in the masjid and we went over the ayat that were recited. And we translated them. And subhanAllah, these were not scholars of the religion. They hadn't studied tafsir. They didn't know Arabic. And we went around reflecting on the ayat. What does this ayat mean to you? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you? Right? Now again, we're not interpreting the verses, but we're reflecting on it. Like even in the study of tafsir, there are several layers of tafsir. There's one layer of tafsir called tafsir bil riwayah. It's also called tafsir bil ma'thur. So you look at how does the Quran explain itself? Or how does the Prophet explain the Quran? That's like real tafsir. Then there's tafsir bil diraya. Tafsir, which you're extracting like rulings from the Quran. You're speaking on behalf of Allah. So Allah said this, which means this is haram. Allah said that, so that means this is allowed. This is also tafsir. But then there's a third layer of tafsir that you don't have to be a scholar to do it. That's called tafsir bil ishara. Tafsir al-ishari. That is reflecting on the Quran. That reflection is open to any Muslim. Any Muslim. And subhanAllah, in every language, the most popular tafsirs are ishari tafsirs. When the author isn't like technically dissecting the ayat, but he's reflecting on it. He's reflecting on it. Right? So after every salah, we would reflect on the ayat. And so one morning after Fajr, the Imam recited some beautiful ayat about Allah like taking people from darkness into light. And subhanAllah, in the convert group, everyone had a story of I was in so much darkness. I was so heedless of the guidance of Allah, and Allah guided me. And each one of them went around talking about how they were guided to Islam. This one person said, I was in jail for 7 years. I got shot 3 times. I almost died 4 or 5 times in my life. I never thought a day would ever come where I would be practicing any religion. Forget Islam. But I encountered Islam, it changed my life. So he said when the Imam recited dhulumati min al-dhulumati ila nur, from darkness to light, he said, I wasn't really sure what the Imam was saying, but I knew some words. And I knew that dhulumat meant darkness, and nur meant light. And even before you translated these verses, in Salah, I just started crying. He said, because I remembered when I was in jail, and I was covered in darkness. And now I'm in complete light. So these aspects of the Quran, reflecting on it, reading the translation, that's open to everybody. And I would even argue that that is a more powerful, authentic, and genuine relationship with the Quran. Right? Allahu Akbar. Allah knows best.
Well,
Cool. Anything else? Going once? Going twice?
I have a question actually.
What's up?
It's more about a technical question.
Yeah.
Let's say in USS you're gone, right? Like you're not there for like
Yeah,
prayer. So
right,
who's
yeah.
supposed to be leading the?
Are you asking because you want to lead?
No, not that. Because like when I get done, like who is supposed to be?
So normally during the semester, we have a whole like army of young Huffaz, right? We have like a group of like 12 students who lead one by one in Ramadan. And when I'm not there, even outside of Ramadan, we do have a list of brothers. We have like an internal WhatsApp group that I update them. I'm not going to be there for Isha or for Maghrib, so someone kind of like fills in, and I also have like a list of like backups.
Okay.
If they can't make it, then make it. But right now it's winter break. So winter break means it's a free for all.
Okay.
Whoever's there. I will tell you though, for Fajr, usually it's Dr. Muhammad. Dr. Muhammad is on vacation, so it's Ahmed.
Okay.
From Tunisia?
Tunisia.
Yeah.
Tunisia.
So that's Fajr is taken care of. Maghrib and Isha is whoever is there.
Okay. And that's
Whoever's
okay.
there. Yeah. Kind of a weird question to ask, like in this moment, but you know, whatever. That is the system. But yeah, alhamdulillah. Cool. Yes, ma'am.
So I've been lucky that like some of my friends who are non-Muslims ask for a copy of the Quran,
Yeah.
and I would just give it to them. But I don't know, like, and I pray for them, like, oh, maybe they'll convert,
Yeah.
accept Islam. But so, is there anything else that we should say if someone asks for a copy of the Quran, like, oh, do wudu, or like wash your hands, or? Is there
Yeah,
something like
that's a good consideration. I think in general you should advise people to treat it like a sacred text and to be respectful of it. Of course, we internally as Muslims do have rules about touching the Mus'haf, right? There's a famous ayah of the Quran, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, that those people don't touch it except that they're pure. However, the technical caveat is this: the Quran is the Arabic expression of the verses. So translations, technically they fall under what is known as tarjumatu ma'ani al-Quran. They're the translation of the meanings of the Quran. So the same like fiqh rules don't apply. So a non-Muslim is not bound by the particulars of our faith, right? So they don't technically have to make wudu to touch it, but you may want to still advise them that it is a holy book. We do believe it's the word of God. So whenever possible, try to treat it with respect as much as you can. So having clean hands when holding it, putting it in a place of respect, not putting it on the ground, that sort of thing, right? And it is a good idea to give that advice because non-Muslims have very different standards about how they treat their books. Very, very differently. I remember my father says this story a lot. When he first immigrated to America, of course, it's the first time in America, everyone's poor, right? He comes to America, he's like, my English is poor, like me, and he had a bunch of other roommates who were different religions. Some were Christian, some were Jewish. So they had this weird, like, rickety table that they used to, like, eat and do their studies at. The table was, like, uneven. Like, one leg was short, one leg was long, so it would, like, always wobble, right? So one of his Christian roommates said, okay, let's put something underneath to make the table stable. And you know what he put? He put his Bible. He put his Bible, and my dad was shocked. He was like, this is your book, like your holy book. Al-Kitab al-Muqaddas, like it's holy. He goes, yeah, but it's okay. So they have very different standards about how they treat their own books. So a general kind of caveat, make sure to treat it with respect. That's all you can do. But to expect them to like make wudu is, I think it will end up becoming a barrier to them actually reading the book, if I'm being honest. Right? Allahu A'lam Bismillah. And by the way, if someone rebuts and says, well, what if, there's a famous story of Umar ibn Khattab, right? When he came and he was on his way to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ, and someone said, well, why don't you take care of your own family first? His sister Fatima had become Muslim unbeknownst to Umar. So he goes and knocks on her door, and there's a companion there who's teaching them the Quran, right? Anyone remember who that was?
Husband or no?
Husband was there as well,
Oh, it's another person.
but someone else was there.
Ah, okay.
Khabbab ibn Arad was there. Anyway, so they were teaching Quran, so he came and he's like, wanted to read it, but they had him like wash up before doing it. There's a few things to note. Number one, that's more of like in the realm of what is known as madhab al-sahabi or fatwa al-sahabi. It was a personal decision on their part. It wasn't based on the fiqh, because the fiqh of wudu actually was legislated afterwards. So it was more just because they wanted him to be clean. And also because the ayat were already revealed, إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ najas. So he was mushrik, and so they didn't want something najas to touch the Quran. And furthermore, the Quran they had was Arabic. So it would fall under the category of like an actual mushaf. But a translation is not a mushaf. The translation. So Allah knows best. Allah. Yes, sir.
Is there like you're obviously good with kind of college student age,
Yeah.
not to say that you're not with older, but is there like a network at the universities that you work with fellow imams? Is, we have kids starting from near that age where you can plug them
Yeah.
into a good community in that college or that area?
Yeah, what's interesting is there's a lot of, I think, really impressive grassroots efforts that are going on everywhere. It depends on where you live. In some pockets in the country, like organizations like ICNA are doing a wonderful job, like in other places. Like I'll tell you, where I grew up, we had Young Muslims, YM. YM is a branch of ICNA. And YM was like an iman saver for me, especially for young boys, because on a weekly basis, it forces you to be in good company, to hear something beneficial, and just, like kick it with other Muslims, But whatever is the equivalent of wherever you're from. I'm not sure where you guys. Oh, Houston. Houston has a lot of. The YM scene in Houston is really, really good. By the way, I'm always coming to Houston for YM talks and YM retreats. They do a bunch of like bonfires, like overnight stays at the masjid. And so the system is called neighbor nets. So every masjid has a neighbor net. Basically, it's their kind of halaqah. And every neighbor net is different, but the basic format is that it's a short, brief halaqah that's peer-led. So it's not like an older imam like talking down to them. It's a peer-to-peer advice. Then they spend the rest of the time just doing stuff: bowling, laser tag, s'mores, bonfire type stuff. I'm not sure where in Houston you live, but in Bear Creek, I think, there's a brand new initiative. It's for a bit older crowd, for young professionals, but I do think your boys are going to benefit because they always get like younger, more dynamic, more relatable speakers. It's called Pillars, is the name of the initiative. The institution is called Hamd, Hamd. Hamd means praise, and they're like young, professional, like youth division is called Pillars. Pillars by Hamd. And they're like bringing in like top-notch scholars like on a monthly basis. It's really, really good program.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very good.
That's one. It's good.
Very cool.
Alrighty.
Thank you guys for your time. Jazakallah khairan. It's been a pleasure. It's my first muktamar and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, really?
May Allah reward all of you and bless you and protect your families.
I mean,
And may Allah allow you to go back home safe and sound, wherever home is. If it's Dallas, may Allah make you guys go back home safe and sound. If it's, California, may Allah allow you to go back home safe and sound. If it's Houston, may Allah forgive you.
So the Bucky's on the way.
Bucky's on the way, exactly. It's a far stop along the way, mashallah. Jazakallah khair.
Sorry, but
No, it's perfect,
all
mashallah.
6 days.
Mashallah. No, you were a big help. You were a big help, mashallah. I don't think I would have made it to my sessions if it weren't for you checking up on me.
Well, look, yesterday,
Yeah.
girl called me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's a good call. It's like, where's your mom?
Maybe 16, maybe
I was at my
17,
home.
right?
So yeah,
Oh, you were.
I was at my home. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
shit.
so we're starting to look at options in place and all that stuff.
Yeah, figure out where you're going.
Heading out.
I have a wedding to do in Dallas,
University of Michigan's
so
great.
in a couple of hours.
You were at Michigan, nice.
Yeah, that's where my wife
Good
too.
football team.
Great this year, yeah. But New Texas is doing good this year too. So
This is
we'll
yours.
see, great college football fan.
California, we don't, there's pockets like UCLA, USC,
Great.
Northern California.
This is really sweet you guys do this.
Terrible.
It's really nice.
It's a common thing we do in Indonesia.
It is, okay.
See you around.
Yes, yeah.
We just give food.
Mashallah.
That is awesome that your son, 1 year old, starting to walk.
Yeah.
So he started walking shortly after he was 1,
Okay.
and I was so happy because I moved to New York first. We were living in Indonesia.
Okay.
I had moved to New York first for my work. Where
Yeah.
I was staying there for 3 more months, and I got to see his first 2 or 3 steps. It was it was literally from here, that's where my wife
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the more falling,
Yeah,
falling
yeah.
forward with catching himself slightly. I was so happy to catch the first full steps, and
That's
then,
awesome.
then I moved to New York.
Yeah.
By the time he moved with me, he's running around,
Yeah,
stuff like that. I'm
yeah.
he missed so much, and
Yeah. No, within 2 days, he went from exactly what you're describing to fall walking
Yeah.
to now he loves it.
yeah, oh yeah,
He'll go from one end to the other,
yeah.
no problem.
Yeah, he would with his grandfather. They'd just walk all around our little community
Yeah.
every day. And
That's
he didn't
awesome.
understand because he moved to New York in January, and he just outside. He pointed outside, and we're
Yeah.
no, we can't just go
Exactly,
outside.
yeah.
I know Opal used to take you every day outside, but. So are you going to University of Texas?
I served there. The mosque is right off the campus.
Oh, sorry, I was asking you.
Oh,
me,
he, yeah, what do you do, brother? Why are you a part of my community?
No, so I work, but the masjid is the closest masjid. So I go to the.
So this is your mom.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
The mom is your mom.
That's why.
Yep.
So whenever you're not there, I'm like, oh no, my mom was
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, it's good. Because sometimes this random person.
Has Qais been around?
Oh well.
Qais?
He was there Friday.
Friday,
But
okay.
Thursday he was not there.
So you're not training to be an imam?
No.
You seem like you are. You have a servant attitude. I always see you
Yeah,
helping with the food and stuff like that. And I was like, I think this guy, this I want to say young guy. You seem like you're early
Yeah.
20s, right?
Yeah, I'm 23 years.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
This young guy here seems like he's got a real servant's heart.
Yeah,
so-
mashallah.
Alhamdulillah, yeah.
What do you work?
I'm an engineer,
What type of engineer?
aerospace.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Alhamdulillah, yeah. I do volunteer in the mosque, so.
Yeah, yeah.
It's here and there.
Mashallah is really plugged in and involved in our community.
Alhamdulillah.
It's been a blessing to have him. It was a real pleasure.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It was a pleasure
So
meeting you
much,
as
so
well.
much fun.
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
baby. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
You'll find his mother.
Jazakallah khair.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
What time are you leaving?
I think I might head out. To be honest.
I'll let so bring there's a speaker thank you or something at 4. I'll just let them know that you're.
Oh, at 4? Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
I'll be able
Okay. Okay.
to.
Be good.
Unfortunately. Oh man. Okay.
I'll-
Alhamdulillah. So the feedback for last session yesterday, you said was
Yeah, it was good because
very positive.
I saw the night yesterday.
Uh-huh.
There's feedback for young adults program,
Okay.
and then there was a post,
Okay.
and I was seeing so I don't really Anwar like that. It's the discussion.
I'm glad.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. But the people don't really like the matrimonial service because it was so many. There's so many people,
Okay.
so it was rushed.
What do you think of it? Was it rushed for you?
For me, alhamdulillah, I
Yeah.
got my information. So
Okay.
that's but I do think the matrimonial it can be better.
Okay.
Inshallah.
You think they'll take the advice and improve it
For the matrimonial,
Yeah, for next time.
I would say I don't think it's a hard fix, right? Because it's just because they didn't expect so many people.
Oh, I see.
I think if we just
There's a
expect
volume.
Yeah, it's a volume issue. Maybe make it 2 days or something like that.
I see.
Yeah.
What was the format?
Like the matrimonial? Well, there's Imam Ahad, Imam Ahad is the Subbah
Yeah.
CEO, right? So he was giving like preparation lectures, and then 30 minutes later there's the matrimonial. And I'm not sure. I'm not a big fan, to be honest. I don't know. It was so the structure was matrimonial. It was they did some game, or like I guess it's like an icebreaker thing, where like all the guys are like what's it called? The game like never have I ever.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then 30-40 minutes, and then take a break, and then you go to a session next room where like we are split to like groups of like 4 guys, 4 girls, and then there's like a prompt, and then you talk based on the prompt.
I see.
I don't know. I'm not a big, but alhamdulillah, I mean I approached the parents already, like a parent. So alhamdulillah, I got my information.
Okay.
But for the matrimonial surface itself, I'm not sure. What do you think?
Is it? Do you find it to be a bit like? Is it awkward to break the ice, or what? How would you improve it?
I don't know. I mean, for me, because I'm serious, right? So like for me, I don't really need to ice break. I just need to get information, like get to know someone who's a match. But that's my.
Yeah.
Maybe for different people, it's
Sure.
yeah, right.
I think for you, it might be more better suited. Hafardine is a program. It's an app as well now, but they do like meetups that are similar. But the difference is that they pre-match you based on like the values, and then they send the picture later.
Okay.
And then unlike other matrimonial services, where you go in and you may not get a match.
Oh yeah, it seems like it's like that. Like
yeah, you may get a match or may not. But with Hafardine, they already take stock of like who's signed up to come, and then they pre-match you with somebody. So even before getting there, you're looking forward to talking to like 2 or 3 people.
Okay.
Because you already have things matching with.
You're right.
And then you meet them in person, then you see if there's like physical chemistry.
Yes.
Right? So I think that may be more your suited for what you're looking for.
So I was actually, so alhamdulillah, what's it called, after the matrimonial, so I know parents from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
So I basically just approached, the mother was there, and say, hey, I want to know about your daughter. Because I saw her daughter also said that she's available. We'll see.
Okay.
Parents are good, so then we'll see how the daughters.
Inshallah. Very good. Very good.
If not, then clear.
Inshallah.
I did my part.
Yeah. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. What is she doing? What do you know?
She's a master's student.
Okay.
Master's student.
In St. Louis?
In St. Louis, Missouri. So I often visit the family's house, right?
Nice.
But I don't really see her because I don't want to.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
What masters in what?
in I don't know, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, but it's like biology stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, sure.
Inshallah. All right.
You sure you don't want to walk around? Look at some clothes for maybe your wife.
You know what? Where's the like?
There's like a bazaar upstairs. Like there's like a bunch of like clothes for girls.
Okay.
If you want, I can show you around if you want.
You know what, man? I have a long drive ahead of me.
That's right.
So I apologize.
Hey.
But I really enjoy my time here.
Really?
Especially the youth sessions. And the young adult ones were like very, very.
Really?
Not because I did that, but just like I really enjoyed it. I just really enjoyed life.
my session is so petani juga nak mana? Dah sampai live?
I have a session yang Sabtu.
Oh, yang kau apa kan?
Sambahan, this is for the ladies. Evening of comedy. On lunch.
Bueno, que no es los communities. Apa nak tidur pun kan ada pergi try to manage kan.
Business is finished. Lunch today. So I didn't know
Likes the same from America.